Welcome to Tardisian Files. Hello listeners! We are now 4 days away from the release of New Who Season 2. Thus, we are expecting there to be many newcomers to the audience. And in the spirit of that, I thought it would be worth compiling a list of my recommendations of episodes that newcomers to the show might be interested in watching to get started for each incarnation of the Doctor. I would like to preface this by admitting that I have not actually watched every single episode of Doctor Who from the classic era, so for the incarnations of the Doctor between 1963 and 1989, my recommendations for some Doctors will be based on what I know about the storylines and some behind the scenes knowledge. Without further ado, let's jump right in. The First Doctor. So this is a bit tricky since not all the episodes from the First Doctor's era survived when the BBC made the short-sighted decision between 1967 and 1978 to destroy old recordings and or tape over them. Additionally, due to some writers and or their descendants owning the rights to the episodes they produced, there are several stories from both the First and Second Doctors, and more recently 2 of the Fourth Doctor's episodes that are missing from iPlayer and the BBC archives. Nevertheless, the episode I recommend to anyone wanting to start from the very beginning would be The Daleks. Not only is this the first ever introduction to the infamous foes of the Doctor, but it showcases the early Doctor very well in the sense that his actions throughout the episode clearly convey that he's not yet the well-seasoned traveller he is in later seasons, having only just left Gallifrey. It also shows his dynamics with Susan, the child of the group, and Ian and Barbara, whose knowledge as teachers make them a crucial part of the episode, and demonstrates that the early Doctor was very reliant on the skills of his companions, and sometimes didn't always make the best decisions, including, in this case, fiddling with the fluid links on the TARDIS deliberately to keep them marooned on Skaro so that he could explore the Dalek settlement, which later turned out to be a grave mistake on his part. The Second Doctor. So, coming up with the same obstacles that we have with the First Doctor, with some of the Second Doctor's episodes currently missing and or existing as frames that have been reconstructed alongside the audio or animations, this one is a bit of a tricky decision. However, if you don't mind watching an episode that's been partly reconstructed using stills, audio and animation, then my recommendation would be The Ice Warriors. This episode demonstrates the Second Doctor's more enthusiastic but more experienced character compared to the First Doctor when he's been put in a very delicate situation. The Earth is in the middle of a new ice age, and the humans that he and the crew encounters are trying to hold back the advance of a glacier as it threatens to encase surrounding human settlements. All the while, the machine that they're using to do that is becoming unstable. And on top of that, a group of ice warriors have become reanimated due to that very same glacier thawing and have invaded the base, kidnapping the Doctor's companion, Victoria. This episode sees the Doctor marching in and within the first 5 minutes helping the humans solve their immediate problem with their machinery, therefore showcasing his ability to work well with others as he proceeds to rely on help from the humans at the base to rescue Victoria and defeat the Ice Warriors. The Third Doctor. The Third Doctor has so many episodes to choose from, with so many wonderful companions, such as Liz Shaw, Jo Grant, and who could forget Sarah Jane Smith. However, the best episode to start with the Third Doctor is, ironically, one of Doctor Who's longest, Inferno. Inferno is a bit of a weird one in this list, as it was a 7-part episode, one of the first of its kind for the series, mostly written to fill the remaining BBC time slots for the show for that season, to allow the writers to properly develop new scripts that are in the pipeline. With that in mind, you would expect it to drag on and show obvious signs of being TV filler, but that's just it. It isn't. The episode turned out to be a massive hit, with the main enemy ultimately being an unknown toxic chemical ooze with severe mutagenic effects on humans exposed to it, and attempting to mine the gaseous deposits of the ooze would have resulted in the Earth's devastation by triggering catastrophic volcanism. Everything you'd want from a sci-fi story set on Earth. But here's the cinch. The Doctor couldn't leave in the TARDIS due to being exiled by the Time Lords. So what did the writers do? They added a subplot where the Doctor removed the TARDIS console from the TARDIS, and while he was using energy from the mining project to experiment with it, to remove the lock that the Time Lords had put on it, he ended up propelling himself sideways in time to a universe where the project was more advanced, witnessing the Earth's destruction, so that when he returned to his own universe, he could prevent the same thing happening. And, wasting no opportunities, the writers made this parallel universe one ruled by fascists and unethical scientists to explore themes of human greed and the dangers of fascism. What a masterpiece. The Fourth Doctor. This was another difficult decision, and it's easy to get lost in the Fourth Doctor's era because Tom Baker was, and still is, the longest serving Doctor. And as such, his tenure was split into many different eras, with different genres and topics being explored throughout the course of the episodes. However, I think it's fair to say that his best episode is Genesis of the Daleks. Not only does the Fourth Doctor deliver some of the most iconic lines in Doctor Who history about morality versus foresight, but we also see so many different sides of his character in this episode. The curious, to the ruthless, to the conflicted, and to the fair. Because, despite knowing all the evil and suffering that the Daleks will go on to cause, and how much he loathes the Daleks at this point, he is still unwilling to avert their creation. Now that is a true hero. The Fifth Doctor. Now, in my opinion, the Fifth Doctor was a mixed bag during his tenure. While the character of the Fifth Doctor was amazing, the writers of the show appeared to favour stories of the Doctor being in space rather than exploring history. Therefore, the most logical episode to start from, I would say, is his debut, Castrovalva. It properly introduces the new Doctor and his crew, serving effectively as a soft reboot for the show after 6 years of Tom Baker being in the role. The Sixth Doctor. Right. Now, while the Sixth Doctor is quite a unique incarnation among the Doctors with very interesting storylines, the truth is that Colin Baker's time on Doctor Who was riddled with behind-the-scenes drama that resulted in his character being written to be somewhat unhinged and, to be honest, quite unlikable for the first half of his time on Doctor Who, with his companion Perry Brown usually getting the brunt of his wrath. Therefore, the best episode, in my opinion, to start with is The Mysterious Planet, which was the first instalment of the season-long Trial of the Time Lord arc. Mostly because the Sixth Doctor sort of mellows out somewhat in this series, caring a lot more about Perry and the other people around him, while still being somewhat stubborn and headstrong. Not only does this episode set up a very intriguing mystery that gets dragged out for the course of the season, but it also shows the Sixth Doctor's character in a much better light compared to previous seasons. So if you want to watch the Sixth Doctor and like him, this is the episode I would start with. The Seventh Doctor. Right, we're getting into some controversial territory here, and by that I mean I'm going to admit something controversial. The Seventh Doctor is not my favourite incarnation of the Doctor, and this is mostly because the quality of the storytelling by this point in the show's history wasn't as good as previous seasons, in my opinion. And part of that reason is because the show's budget had suffered immensely after the hiatus in 1985, so overall the producer's ability to produce the same calibre of episodes compared to the show's peak in the 1970s was diminished. That said, Sylvester McCoy and Sophie Aldred still managed to brilliantly portray the characters of the Seventh Doctor and Ace McShane, ultimately going on to become one of the most recognisable Doctor companion pairs in the show's history. Therefore, what better place to start than with the very beginning of their friendship? The episode Dragonfire. The Eighth Doctor. This incarnation isn't as accessible as previous incarnations to new audience members due to having only 2 televised adventures, and one of which being a short story, the other being the somewhat ill-fated 1996 TV movie. However, this Doctor's tenure during the show's quote-unquote wilderness years between 1989 and 2005 cannot be understated, as it was the Eighth Doctor's audio adventures more than anything that helped to keep the hype surrounding Doctor Who alive, leading to its eventual revival. Therefore, the best place to start with the Eighth Doctor's audios is Storm Warning, introducing us to companion Charlie Pollard and the temporal instability of her continued existence past her apparent death in 1930, giving us a much deeper exploration into the same laws of time that made up the basis of time travel rules in the Revival series. The War Doctor. Yes, this Doctor does have audio stories of his time during the Time War, but nothing beats the majestic performance of the late John Hurt. So, if you want to see this Doctor at his best, watch Day of the Doctor. That will tell you all you need to know about this incarnation, and it is absolutely incredible. The Ninth Doctor. This is an easy one for me. It's End of the World. Not only does the existential theme of Rose being confronted by the literal end of planet Earth, billions of years into the future, well past her death and the death of everything she knows, hit a surprisingly bittersweet chord for the audience, but this episode also shows the Ninth Doctor's character in all its glory. The side to him that's still mesmerised by all of the beauty in the universe, and the side to him that's disgusted by the ugliness underneath. The Doctor's trauma from the Time War is alluded to for the first time, and unlike many previous incarnations, this Doctor openly displays tearful emotion on screen when being offered sympathy in private by Jabe. And above all, who else could forget that phone call that Rose had with Jackie? A seemingly normal phone call for Rose's mother, but a phone call that felt a million miles away and billions of years back for Rose. It's just all round an amazing episode. The 10th Doctor. This is a tricky one, as the 10th Doctor's era can be split into 4 equal parts: domestic bliss with Rose, rebound friendship with Martha, chaotic party life with Donna, and devastated broodiness when he loses her. However, the 10th Doctor's most iconic stories do occur in Series 4, and so, in my opinion, if you're going to watch the series, you're going to have to start from the beginning, with partners in crime. The 11th Doctor. Now, the 11th Doctor was the first Doctor I watched on screen, so for me personally, I do have a bit of nostalgia for 2010 because of Series 5 of Doctor Who. But my most logical starting point for 11, in my opinion, is The Time of Angels and Flesh and Stone, the 2-part episode. This episode reintroduces us to River Song without us having to have watched her first appearance in Silence in the Library. Amy has been travelling with the Doctor for a short while now, so she's sort of broken in as a companion. The Army of Weeping Angels keeps the Doctor on his toes throughout this 2-part episode, and finally, the Cracks in the Universe storyline gets explored with a little bit more detail. The 12th Doctor. I'll admit that when I first watched Series 8, I had mixed feelings about the 12th Doctor's character. Peter Capaldi played the Doctor remarkably well, but I felt the character was a little too far removed from the modern versions of the Doctor that came before him. Therefore, I was pleasantly surprised when the Doctor's character became a lot more laid back while still being somewhat stoic at times during Season 9. Thus, I think the best introduction to the 12th Doctor is actually the beginning of Series 9, with The Magician's Apprentice and The Witch's Familiar. The episode sort of acts as a soft reboot for the 12th Doctor's character. It introduces us to Clara's new routine as full-time companion domiciled on Earth. Unit and Missy are brought back seemingly as more regular parts of the 12th Doctor's era, and just compared to the Series 8 premiere Deep Breath, in my opinion, it was just more action-packed and kind of just a bit more enjoyable. I think it had a bit more heft to it when first watching it on screens. So, I think it's a good starting point for the 12th Doctor. The 13th Doctor. Our Queen Jodie Whittaker. I have a lot of love for the 13th Doctor, though as many fans may agree, her first 2 seasons were not the most popular. But for Jodie's final series, Chris Chibnall pulled the rabbit out of the hat with the Flux story, producing some of the best episodes of his time as showrunner, and undertaking the first season-long story arc since the trial of the Time Lord in 1986. Thus, the best starting point for the best of the 13th Doctor, in my opinion, is the Halloween Apocalypse. The 14th Doctor. Easy. The 60th anniversary specials. There are only 3 televised episodes for this Doctor, and if you're going to watch them all. Please. Just do it. Now, the upcoming Season 2 notwithstanding, I personally feel like the best episode to start with for the 15th Doctor is Rogue. This episode sort of stands alone from the others in this season as it requires no prior Doctor Who knowledge. It takes place in a very popular era for many audiences, namely the Regency period, and it features top-notch actors such as Jonathan Groff and Indira Varma playing even better characters on screen, and it also explores a side to the Doctor that's never been explored before, namely his sexuality and romantic interests, making this episode the perfect starting point for a soft introduction to the 15th Doctor's character. There you have it, folks. That is my list of episodes that serve as the best starting point for each Doctor. Let me know what you guys think of my rankings in the comments section of your favourite streaming app, or on the social media posts for this episode on Instagram and TikTok. You can find us under the handle @Tardisian Files Podcasts. Please leave a like and share with your friends, and as always, see you next time on Tardisian Files.